Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our March California Brokers Business Accelerator on how to work with difficult people.
Turn the
by our
down just a little bit.
Central California broker, Jeff Green, but also featuring a panel of some of our other California brokers.
We're doing a quick class here.
Steve Rowe and Omar Hellman. Remember, you can earn monthly gifts by referring agents to Allison James. For the month of April, for every agent you refer over, you will earn a $20 bill, even if they don't join. Remember, to receive this $20, you first need to make sure that you have spoken with the agent and they are expecting us to call them to tell them more about Allison James. If the agent you refer does join, then you will receive a monthly or yearly residual income. To refer an agent to us, please go to Allison James University and click on the Referrals tab. From there, you will find a form that you can fill out with the agent's information. Lastly, Allison James has an in-house transaction coordinator company, Sharp TC. Our in-house transaction coordinators are licensed, knowledgeable, and experienced. You can have your first transaction done with Sharp TC for just $99. To learn more, please visit the Allison James University dashboard and click on the Transaction Coordinator button. From there, you will be taken to a page where you can fill out a form to learn more. Or you can get your first transaction started right away. For $99, you can't go wrong. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started with our California Brokers Business Accelerator. Remember, if you have any questions during this presentation, you can type them in the chat box on your Zoom control panel. I'll now pass it over to our brokers, starting with Jeff Green. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning. Just checking. Oh, I'm doing well. Just checking to make sure that you can, yep, looks like my screen has come up, dealing with difficult people. So for all of you that are in attendance, and we have some people in our Oakdale office here watching on our big screen TV, here's what's going to happen today. We're going to do a short little overview of some processes for dealing with difficult people, and then we're going to have a roundtable with our brokers bringing in their collective wisdom. One of the things that we deal with as brokers on almost a daily basis is difficult, combative people, people that are complaining, people that are sometimes hostile. I had one yesterday, and I got cussed out, believe it or not. So I won't give you all the details of that, but and then it ended up working out just fine. So dealing with difficult people in transactions and listings. So here are the people that you may have issues with. Inspectors, usually not too often, but sometimes that could happen. Title and escrow, they're pretty good at customer service, but once in a while you'll get somebody inside the system that is resistant, not working to help you, not assisting you as they should. And then sometimes the lender becomes an issue, especially if you're the listing agent. You're dealing with a lender who is not forthcoming, and you're trying to get information. Maybe you've extended, and they're not providing some good transparency. Another group of people is clients, the people that are actually buying or selling a home. And then the final one is other agents. And I put that in all caps because that's generally the biggest group of people that we run into problems with. I rarely get calls with difficulty with inspectors, title. I do sometimes with lenders. I definitely with clients, but the biggest one is other agents. And I asked some of our other brokers their opinion, and they gave me the same opinion. So let's first of all talk about what not to do. One of the things that you want to avoid doing is pulling your broker into the conversation prematurely. Now, we really want to help you, okay? We want you to be able to solve the problem, but sometimes what happens is if you're dealing with a client or you're dealing with the other side, if we get pulled into the conversation too early, then you get sidelined. They just stop dealing with you, and you can end up going through the whole transaction as kind of a fifth wheel in the transaction and not being directly communicated to. So we want to support you. We want to do everything we can to make sure you're the primary person in the transaction. And we don't want people going around you if they're not happy, particularly other agents. They may not like the way you negotiated the deal on behalf of your client, and they come complaining to us. Well, that's the wishes of the client, and we're gonna endorse you and put you in the place that you need to be, a position of authority in the transaction. So another thing is, don't pull your broker into a conversation without she or he being prepared in advance. One of the things that's really tough for us is you're having a combative situation with the other side, and you say, "Here's my broker's number. Give him a call." And we get a call without any information on what's going on, and typically an angry person. It's always good if you're going to involve us to let us know what's going on in advance, so we're prepared to help you at the highest level. Another thing you don't want to do is quote your broker, especially incorrectly quote your broker. I had an agent quote me one time, "My broker's not going to let this file record." Well, truth is, we can't stop it from recording if the parties want to do that. Don't quote your broker, and particularly if we're sending you an email back and forth that's personal to you, don't forward that to the other side unless we've told you that it's okay to do so, because sometimes we're talking about issues that are in the interest of our client and not the other side. So these are just some common sense things. So another thing is, don't flame anyone, especially via email or voicemail. They used to say, there was an old saying, diamonds are forever. They're not really forever. You can lose them. But the new saying is the internet's forever. Anything that's on the internet is permanent. It never goes away. It's stored somewhere. So avoid aggressive communications and hostile communications in any format at all, especially when it's recorded. Avoid being combative. That really doesn't solve any problems. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through this. And don't be pressured to provide immediate answers. It's okay to say, "I'll get back to you. I don't know that. I need to research that," or "You've caught me at a busy time. I need to respond to you a little bit later." And one thing that you want to do is avoid being drawn into massive, never-ending email threads. There's been several times where agents have come to me and they've said, "Hey, I have a problem with the other side," and they forward me an email thread that's about 15 emails deep. And I would need a flow chart bigger than the side of a barn to understand the whole email thread. Try to deal with each issue at a time, end them, and not go into these long, protracted email threads with people. Okay, so let's talk about what to do. First of all, notify your broker immediately if you think there's going to be a big issue, a big blowout. "Hey, I'm in this transaction. The other side did this. You may be hearing from them. I may need your help." And the best way to notify your broker is with bullet points, with time stamps on them. "This happened here, this happened here, this happened here. Here's the issue." And when you ask for help from your broker, tell them what you already did in advance. "Here's what I've tried to do to work out this scenario, and it didn't work. Here's why it didn't work." Secondly, if you're going to have a combative situation, call car legal before the other side does. If you think that it's going to get really ugly and there's going to be legal advice needed, call car legal first, because the first side that calls car legal gets to be the first one, gets to be the one that talks to car legal throughout the transaction. Car legal will only advise one side of the transaction, and then you get referred to the referral board, which I had a situation where the other side had already called car legal, and it was a discussion, it was an issue with another brokerage in town that was pretty good size. Every lawyer on the referral board in 2 counties had a conflict of interest with that real estate company, and I had to go 3 counties away to get somebody to talk with me, to advise me, and it took 2 months. So remember, call car legal first if you think there's going to be an issue. Also, own your own problems and mistakes. If you did make a mistake, own it, figure out a way to solve it, try to find a solution that way, and look for win-win solutions. It's very, very important. Make sure that when you finish conversations and transactions, make sure that everybody's dignity is intact and nobody feels like they got beat up or put down or body slammed, because you will deal with these folks later in the transaction or in the future. So here's some things that I want to advise you on, and then we're gonna do a couple more slides and we're done. Develop your list of one-liners. One-liners in negotiations and arguments are much like martial arts. When people study martial arts, they study forms or kata, and they go through all these steps on the mat, back and forth, practicing blocks and things like that. And those are essentially objection handlers to somebody trying to strike you or kick you. The same thing is true in verbal confrontations. Your one-liners should be prepared. You should know what to say in advance in specific situations, and you should develop your own arsenal of one-liners. So first thing you want to practice is repeating and affirming. So something like, what I hear you say is, repeat their concern, and you can say, I appreciate that, or that's valid. And then having said that, have you considered? So the process where you repeat and affirm, and then give them something to consider. And avoid the word but. A but really offends people. It basically means you don't agree with them. Hey, I hear what you're saying, but, and that causes people not to feel like you're really hearing them out. Having said that, have you considered is a much more affirming and positive way to handle the situation. Define the target. A lot of times you get an angry person who's mad at what's going on at title or mad at what's going on with the lender. And a great way to answer that is, thanks for letting me know that. However, your anger is misdirected. The time, we had a situation with one of our agents where they couldn't close because the lender hadn't performed, and the buyer was calling the agent angry at them. And the response is, hey, thanks for letting me know how you feel about that. However, it seems like you're angry, but that anger is misdirected. It's the lender who hasn't performed in this situation. Can we go ahead and get on a three-way call with them or something like that? Or it may be your client is angry at you because you didn't provide them with all the disclosures yet. Well, I'm sorry, I'm upset too. It's the listing agent. He hasn't delivered them to me. I have asked 3 times already. Another thing is a good one-liner to have is something that has to do with deferring. That's a good question. Let me get an answer for you. I'll get back to you by, and give them a time. And when you do that, under promise and over deliver. If you think you're going to have the answer in an hour, tell them, hey, I'll get back to you in about 3 hours, because you may not get it in an hour, but if you get back to them in an hour, that's going to really impress them. So defer their question to later, and then get them an answer. And by the time usually you get back to them, they've calmed down and that type of thing. So also collect information from them. A good one-liner is, share with me why this is important to you, or share with me what you think would be the best outcome. What outcome are you looking for? And let people talk. Sometimes people just need to get something off their chest. They are stressed about the transaction. They just need to talk about it. So let them do it. Let them get it all out, and don't rush them. Let them, because the time you spend letting them cool down is going to be very leveraged time for you moving forward. So let's talk about some preventative measures, and then we're just about done here. First of all, from the very beginning of the transaction, identify all players as early as possible and explain their roles. Tell your client what's the lender going to do. Tell them what title and escrow does. Talk about the inspectors and what they do, so they don't think you're the inspector and you're the one that knows everything about the house. And everybody else in the transaction, give them a clear perspective of what everybody does. The next thing you should do is set expectations by future pacing your client. You should end each update with the statement, here's what's going to happen next. If you don't do that, you're really not doing a good job with your client, and you're leaving them wondering what's going on. A good example is they go into contract, you get an accepted offer, you say, hey, congratulations, the offer is accepted. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to need to deliver your earnest money deposit to the title company by Friday, or whatever the end of 3 days is. And then once that money has been received, you call them up and say, hey, I've got evidence that you deposited the money. I just heard that the appraisal has been ordered. here's what's going to happen next. The appraiser is going to go out to the property, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. You know what to say. But every time somebody is updated in a transaction, make sure you tell them what's going to happen next. Because that way, most people, they're not going to worry about the whole end game. Pardon me. They're not going to worry about all the steps, but they just want to know what's coming at them, what's going to happen next. If they call you and ask you what's happening next, you're not doing your job. So just update them. Thoroughly explain the next step or activity in the transaction. And the final preventative measure, and there's many others I want to put out there, but calendar all transaction dates and events and set multiple reminders prior. This is going to keep people from getting angry at you so that you can perform on schedule. And then finally, I want to share some resources. There's a book called The Asshole Survival Guide, How to Deal with People Who Treat You Like Dirt by Robert I. Sutton. This is a good book. I've read this book. It sounds like a very crass title, but this guy's actually a business professor at Stanford, and he specializes in confrontations in the business world. So very, very good book. Another one is a podcast by HBR IdeaCast called Creating Psychological Safety in the Workplace. This is a really good podcast. I'd encourage you to listen to it. This particular episode and all the episodes that are on there. Most of the episodes in HBR IdeaCast are really good. If you don't know what HBR is, it's Harvard Business Review. It's the business school at Harvard, and they bring in experts on various topics and interview them. It's a very, very good resource. So there's a link there. And then CRS has a course on client negotiations, unlocking hearts versus unlocking horns, which is another good resource. And then finally, here's an article, 11 phases that will help diffuse an argument. So these are all good resources. And I know that our brokers on the line are eminently qualified to present any information about dealing with difficult people. So I'm going to open the floor right now and ask which of you out there would like to, any broker who would like to bring up some suggestions or guidelines for dealing with difficult people.
I'll take it if that's okay.
Sure, go right ahead.
Excellent presentation too, by the way, Jeff. It was well thought out, well prepared. So good job. The number one thing I have found in my dealings with combative type situations is emotion. And Jeff mentioned this, but emotion, when it takes over a transaction, it's impossible to resolve any issue. So my number one advice is keep the emotion out of it, even if the other side, whether it's another agent, whether it's your client, whether it's a contractor, whatever the case might be, an inspector, keep the emotion out of the conversation. Listen when they come at you in an emotional state. Listen to what they have to say, sorting out in your head exactly what point they're trying to make, and don't talk over them, don't interrupt them. Let them, from start to finish, complete what their thought is, even if it's in an emotional state and presentation. Once they've finished, that will provide you with an opportunity to respond in what you think at the moment is an appropriate response. And that could be anything from, like Jeff said, you make a good point here, let me get back to you, all the way up to, well, have you thought about this, or have you thought about that? And if the other side tries to cut you off, you don't have to lay down for them. You can just simply state in a non-combative type manner, hey, listen, I listened to you all the way through. Please listen to me. Again, say that, but in a nice manner, not in a combative manner. When you get into this type of a conversation, do not exceed your authority. Keep in mind, page 1 of the RPA simply states, this is a contract between the buyer and seller. The real estate brokerages are not involved. are not a part of the agreement, not involved, but a part of the agreement. And so don't exceed your authority. Don't make decisions for your client, whether it's a buyer or seller, and make a statement based on your thoughts. It's not a good way to go, and you could create a big problem, not only for yourself and your client, but also between your client and the other side, whether it's the buyer or seller. My suggestion is never, ever put the buyer and seller physically together to have a conversation. The problem with that is you will have no control over the emotional level of that meeting. If one of the parties has an issue and they attack the other side, you could blow your transaction apart and create a big problem for you as well as the other brokerage. So again, my suggestion is I don't care how nice the two sides are. I don't care how smooth the transaction seems to be moving to get along. Keep the buyer and seller separated. I've seen in my experience lawsuits happen after buyers and sellers have gotten together. So again, avoid that if at all possible. And Jeff mentioned calling car legal. That's an excellent thought. And the reason I bring that up, and I thought it was an excellent suggestion by Jeff, I had a situation a couple of weeks ago where one of my agents was talking with the other agent, and they got into a dispute. So my agent calls me, we discuss it. I advise her to call car legal. She did. And then in a later conversation with the other agent said, my agent mentioned that she had called car legal and had presented her side of the situation. When she was talking and went back and talked to the other agent about it, the other agent said, well, I called car legal too, and this is what they told me. That's not a true statement because, as Jeff mentioned, they won't take both sides of the stories. They'll refer the second call to a referral type basis. So right away, that's an alarm that, hey, the other side's not being completely truthful. You don't necessarily throw that in their face, but at least be aware of it so you know you're dealing with the other side who may or may not be completely honest and truthful in this situation. That's what I have for today. Jeff, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, I wanted to make one comment about getting the clients together. I agree with you 100%. There are a few circumstances that come up in transactions and largely over personal property. Like somebody might say, I really want to buy that pool, those chairs around the pool and all that. I want to buy that. Can we put that in the contract? And the answer is no. That's personal property. You'll have to work out a deal with the seller. And we can't really have anything to do with that. And the only way that they can work out such a deal is if they communicate with each other directly. And sometimes that requires a face-to-face meeting. And the only way that I would recommend that is after all the contingencies have been removed and we have clear to close. We're moving towards closing. And if they want to go over, it's almost like they're going to a garage sale at the seller's house to purchase something. But we have to stay out of that. And if that kind of meeting has to happen, it should definitely be, after contingencies are removed. So, Omar, did you have anything to add?
I think great insight. Absolutely terrific topic, just simply because we have to deal with a lot of things throughout a transaction prior to, during, and after. And with all of the details that you're working through with your client, having another side that's unpleasant or not easy to work with makes it even more challenging, not just for yourself, but for your client, because it's an emotional process for them. What I want to share with everybody is, write down as many of the most important goals throughout the process that you can, and make that as part of your ultimate end goal for the transaction, irregardless of what may be happening with the other side or the other parties or third parties in this case, as Jeff has mentioned. Reflect on the fact that the ultimate goal is to get to a resolution that's amicable for all parties. Having a sit down face to face with your own client and just reviewing things, making sure that their goals are being met is priority number one, and then ultimately trying to reflect that to the other side. So things can be hopefully resolved rather than escalated. So I think you guys have shared excellent details. Jeff and Tom have obviously been in the business for plenty of years to give you guys insight. And I think that this topic can go on forever if we really wanted it to. But most importantly, what I just wanted to share is try to get to a point where resolutions can be had, and ultimately the goals to close the transaction in the best way possible. So thank you for giving me a couple minutes.
Excellent insight. And we've saved our most difficult person for last. That would be Steve. Just kidding, Steve. Hey, Steve, you got something to share with us?
But just a couple of thoughts. One of the things that hit me is,
that was a joke, Steve, by the way.
I understand that. We'll get back to you later. Let me get an answer for that one. The thing is difficult people come in all shapes and sizes. Some of them are rude. Some are going to be unfair. Some are angry. Some are demanding. Some just simply have selective hearing. They can be disrespectful. They can be demeaning. They can be indecisive. And the worst kind are the ones who are dishonest. And I think my first advice for each of our agents in this is don't be that person, because sometimes difficult people are simply a reflection of how we're handling ourselves. So, the first thing is keep yourself, in line and make sure that you're not being these things and being the one that somebody else is talking about as being that difficult agent or that, to work with. I think there's times, if I've got a choice, there's times that I need to walk away. Obviously not when I'm right in the middle of a transaction, but sometimes you can see, we're starting to work with some buyers and you can just see that they're going to be the kind that are going to cause conflict. Sometimes you need to make a choice to walk away from that kind of a buyer and not risk your own reputation, to walk through a transaction with them. If I don't have a choice, I think Tom said it, the biggest thing is keep your emotions in check. Sometimes we need to slow our speech down. We need to just check our voice volume, listen well before we start talking, and document. And I think probably the final point I'd like to make is never talk about your difficult person, your difficult client to the other side of, somebody else involved in the transaction. Don't spread the conflict. So those are my thoughts. Appreciate the time.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And you make a really good point about, using, just all your professional skills and not being, working at their level. And I just want to encourage everybody, that there's two ways you can go through a deal. You can go through with force, trying to force things to happen, or you can use finesse, you can use skill. And the people that use skill make more money and they have more repeat and referral business. So I think great topic today. Thank you, brokers, for your insights. And it's good to know that you guys are in good hands with brokers that can assist you in these difficult situations that you find yourself in. This video or this webinar will be on our AJI University probably in a day or two. So if you want to review it or look at the resources list, that will be there. And I wish you all great success. Back to you, Tori.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this month's California Brokers Business Accelerator. Thank you to all of our brokers, Steve, Tom, and Omar, for all of your wonderful insight, but a very special thank you to Jeff Green for putting together such a great topic and presentation and sharing your insight as well. As Jeff said, this will be on Allison James University under the Learn section within 48 hours. If you have any questions, you guys know that you can always reach out to your brokers at any time. Thanks again for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. Bye, everyone.